Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to take my game script from part 4 and make a few improvements. It is a complete game, but it could really use a larger map. I would also like some real menu screens and maybe another type of enemy. Making the level larger isn't terribly difficult to do using my HTML map maker. I can adjust the size of the level in the HTML document to make the level longer, but the real problem with the map maker is how many tiles it has. It doesn't have enough to make a really good looking level, and there isn't really any way to make it support more tiles. The map maker works by using pictures to generate a letter array. Each letter in the array represents a different tile. Using all lowercase letters I could have 26 tiles, and if I include uppercase letters I could have 52 tiles. I could also have a few more if I included special characters, but at that point it would start to become impractical. The map maker itself is already a little impractical because of all the clicking involved. Using the map maker to make a longer level would be a lot of work just to make a level that's lacking in detail. And the lack of detail isn't even the worst problem with using the letter array. The real problem with the letter array is how the game script uses it. The game script turns each letter in the array into a sprite, so even a small level would generate hundreds of sprites that the game would have to draw on every update. Making the level longer would only add to this problem. If I have the game script draw the background tiles to a large background surface rather than creating sprites, the game speed increases significantly. In fact, it increases the speed so much the game actually tops out at 60 frames per second, which is the maximum speed the game can have because it's programmed to be limited to 60 frames. This is actually the first time my game has ever run at full speed, and it's all due to having less sprites to draw. The less sprites it has to draw, the better the game performs. So now the game generates a background surface from the letters in the letter array, but if the background is going to be a single surface, why not just have the background be a pre-rendered image that I just load into the game? Or better yet, why don't I just render everything and have the platform sprites be invisible? Then the game doesn't have to draw any sprites for the background or the platforms, and the sprites for the platforms will just be used for collisions. They don't need to have anything drawn on them because what should be drawn on them is already part of the background. So what I could do now is use the level array the way it was originally designed. I could just use letters for the type of sprite it should be, like using P for platform. Since it's unlikely I'll have more than 50 different types of sprites to place on the level, using letters would be a practical approach. But in the end, I decided to just abandon the letter array and write down the platforms myself. Writing down all the platforms by hand was kind of tedious, but it is an improvement to the game. By writing the platforms myself, I can use rectangles instead of squares, which means a wall that would otherwise be tons of platforms is actually just one platform, and every platform is just one platform, bringing the number of platforms down to just a handful. It takes a while to find the size and position of each rectangle, but since there's only a few of them, it's manageable. I figured it's better to have the game test collisions against just a few platforms rather than 100 of them. I think anything that makes the game more simple is an improvement, so it might not be easier, but it's better. Since I'm going to be using pre-rendered backgrounds now, I decided not to use the background I made, and opted to use this already detailed background from Castlevania Symphony of the Night. This is the first boss room in the game, and all I had to do to put it in my game is write down where the platform should be. It's obviously not original like a homemade background, but it is pretty convenient to be able to use already designed levels. Especially since there are a ton of video game backgrounds to find online. Reusing backgrounds from other games saves me a lot of work, and it's kinda cool to see levels I'm familiar with in a game that I made. Since adding an enemy to the map only takes one line of code, once I added the first enemy, I just went on to create the title screen. It's obviously inspired by Pac-Man, although slightly more boring since the characters aren't animated at all. It's basically just my attempt to make a title screen that's animated without just flashing the words "press start." Although I think flashing the words "press start" would be okay, especially if the game was accompanied with some cool arcade music. I really don't think there's any need to get that elaborate with it though. The title screen is actually pretty useless since all it does is make you have to press a button to start the game rather than just starting the game. It's actually something that would be better left turned off, but I did want to add it because it seemed like a logical place to start adding different screens to the game. I created the title screen by making it an object that splits update time with the player. If the main loop is updating the title screen, it isn't updating the player. That way the game doesn't run in the background during the title screen. Since the title screen and player split update time, I had an interesting decision to make with the input handler. Should the player and title screen both use the same one, and the input handler will have different definitions depending on which screen is being updated? Or should each screen just have its own input handler with its own definitions? I decided to give each screen their own input handler. The input handler isn't a very long code, and in the case of the title menu, it only contains a definition for a single key. You press the start button and the game will start. At that point, the inputs will be passed to the player's input handler, rather than having them sent to the title screen. So I have one enemy that can be easily destroyed as always. Rather than adding a bunch of enemies to this boss room, I decided to think about how I could further expand the size of the level by making it possible to enter different rooms like in Castlevania. So I made another room and tried to figure out how I could connect them together. What I ended up doing was adding an invisible exit sprite where the door to the next room would be. Then when the player collides with that sprite, the game will load a new background and new platforms. Then the player is placed wherever the entrance to the room should be. It works pretty well unless Mega Man is in the air. Then it looks sorta weird because Mega Man starts at the bottom of the entrance even if he was in the air when he left the previous room. I could find out where Mega Man was when he collided with the exit sprite and adjust his entrance on the other side accordingly, but I decided not to worry about that detail since I was mostly just interested in being able to add more rooms. Rather than having the end of the boss room be a dead end, I decided to have it connect to this very tall corridor that connects to 3 other rooms. If you've played Castlevania Symphony of the Night, then you might recognize this room from the Alchemy Lab. This is actually the room that is before the boss room, although in my game I guess it's after the boss room. So for my 3 rooms connected to this room, I made them all dead ends. The 2 rooms on the right are the same as the previous dead end room, and the one on the left is the save point from Symphony of the Night since it happened to be the most convenient dead end when going left, which only makes sense if you look at a map of the Alchemy Lab. For whatever reason, dead end rooms that are on the right have square steps for the floor, but rooms that are dead ends on the left have slopes. My game doesn't have support for slopes, so that pretty much forces me to use the only other dead end that could be on the left, which is the save point. So now my level has 5 rooms, which gives me quite a bit of space to move around in. It was at this point that I decided to add the screen for the pause button, which works just like the title screen and does exactly what you would expect it to do. It stops the game from updating until you press the button again, and then it resumes updating the game. Then of course I added the game over screen, which just stops the game from updating, and that's it, since there is no button you can press to restart the level. You just have to restart the entire script. A continue button would be nice, but it isn't exactly necessary, so I didn't add one. It's pretty tough to die on a map with only one enemy, so it's not like it will happen a lot. The only screen I have left to make is the level complete screen, but first there needs to be a way to complete the level. The sprite sheet I have of the Alchemy Lab came with a sprite of this glowing blue orb thing that's used for special items, so I decided to use that as the level exit. It's the same as the game over screen, except it says level complete. Nothing happens, the game is just over. Although I guess it does create some point to the game. Apparently the point of the game is for Mega Man to walk around in a castle trying to find a glowing blue orb for some reason. Which may not be the best point to a video game, but at least there is one. I guess if there were a few more rooms, it could be kind of like a maze where you have to find the right door that leads to the end of the level. But if that is the point of the game, then it should have at least more than one type of enemy. So I decided to try to add a new enemy other than just the type I already had. So I decided to go with this wind-up guy from Bubble Bobble, and at first it was just a copy of the Goomba but with different images for the sprite. It looked different but behaved the same way. Just going back and forth isn't quite what the wind-up guy did in Bubble Bobble, but it's sorta similar. I think it could be fine if the Goomba didn't already behave the same way. When I changed the Goomba's behavior to be on a fixed track, it was because I was trying to save processing power so the game wouldn't be so slow. With all the improvements I've made to the script, having the Goombas use their original collision detection to fall off of platforms works just fine without slowing down the game. So now I have a game that's a little bit better than what it was. It's a little more polished with a much larger level, actual menu screens, and at least some variety in enemies. Although the title does seem kinda weird considering I'm claiming it's a Castlevania game, but it's still starring Mega Man. So in the next video, I'll take on the challenge of adding a much more complicated character by replacing Mega Man with Alucard. I hope you found this project interesting, and thanks for watching.